Hey everybody, this is Andrew Frankel. I'm back with more of Terra Incognita. Today I wanted to highlight some of the differences in Terra Incognita that we have developed for our character building, particularly our classes and races, because they're quite different than the standard, elf, gnome, dwarf, human, halfling that you might see in a lot of the other games. So I really want to show what we're about. I'm going to share my screen so you can see everything. Share. There we go. So you should be able to see the interior view of the player's guide. So the player's guide, we went through a little bit last time because we talked about the entire process of building a character. So within the book, there are all of these abilities, and they have these little icons that you can see on the right here that helps you kind of classify and determine what kind of ability it is. And some different abilities or traits that you can pick up actually have maybe one or two of these. Like you might have one that increases your stats, but also gives you more accuracy. So you might have two of those little icons. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So here are 12 races. We have definitely some martial races like the Ursus or Arborimics. And they're built for fighting. They're a little bit more durable. Clickers are definitely a martial class. They'll play well with, say, like a ranger or even like a monk type character. And then you also have some that are more rogue or sneaky, such as the Scurious or the Salamandrus are definitely pretty good at hiding. Depending on if you want to be aerial or aquatic, you've got the Volans and the Piscus. And we have two very humanoid races too, whether more kind of a tribal hominis or the moderni, which are a modern human with actually even a futuristic one, really. So of a sci-fi human that has ties to more technology and like different crafting with artifacts and engineering. They'd be running around with laser swords and sky sleds and fun stuff like that. The Mistella and Talpa are also kind of a medium-sized one. The Mistella are definitely good in the water, but also on land. Good hunters. Talpa are burrowers. So we've got a variety of different environments that each one of these is like best in. They're like king in their own environment for the most part. But there is some overlap. So like the Scurious, because they're in the forest, might run into Ursus sometimes, or they might run into some Lacerda. So there's definitely some overlap, but each of them tends to stay to what they're really good at. So in terms of an adventuring group, when you end up having a group of adventurers, you have kind of the outliers, the ones that maybe weren't like super happy just hanging out at their little tribal area, whether it's a town or a city or even just a kind of like little settlement. So they had a reason for leaving, whether they've got that like the wanderlust that for adventure, or they're looking for some kind of revenge, or they have some kind of story arc that takes them out of their comfort zone. And that's how they're going to come together with some of these other races and form a mixed group. So looking down the next pages, you get into each, as I showed you with the previous video, each section is going to have sort of a story or narrative to go with it and some art. And then from there, you're going to go into the specifics on their culture. The items that are specific to their class, or not their class, but their race rather, and the ones that fit their style of play and just their aesthetic. And then they have abilities that match. So each race is going to have 15 abilities. By the time you're done at level 20, you should have about 10 of those, possibly 11. There's a couple levels where you have some wiggle room and you get to choose how you're going to take your abilities or traits. So therefore, you end up having not exactly every character being the same. So even if there's 10 of them that are better than usual and most people are going to choose those, you still might end up going a little bit different on that. You also have limitations on the right. It's usually suggested for role play and the point of not getting too overpowered that you choose at least 2, 3, 4 of those, all 6 of them if you want. And then also the racial info. And every race is exactly the same. So in the previous video, I did talk a lot about the Ursus because I used one of them to make a character. So I really wanted to focus on the other 11 races here. Going on to the clickers. The clickers are an insectoid race that are very malleable. So you end up having a lot of adaptations. So as they molt, they can change. They can change the shape of some of their arms, or they can add wings and things like that. They have a different type of culture with as you'd expect of insects. So they have the royalty of the queens, and then they also have the drones, the warriors, the workers, and such. And one thing I like about each of these races is that we have the naming scheme. So you're going to have some kind of name that fits. So there's a specific naming scheme for workers or warriors or drones. So you would try to stay to that for the most part. Not that you have to, but it's suggested, and it helps create a stronger feel of just like that race, that aesthetic, and the style. Here's again the items, and they have their own, again, 15 different options. All the racial info in there, the movement, the vitals, and whatnot, lifespan, reproduction, because that can actually play in. We want the different different lifestyles of the races to actually play into the way that you have to role play. So if they have a shorter lifespan, you're going to end up playing different than one that does not. Or if you have one that you chose a character that's still in adolescence, and it's because of that they're changing, that can definitely pull into the role-playing situations. Scurrius, these are the smallest of the races. They're very tiny. They could be cute. They can also be dangerous. They're meant to be kind of like a sniper, sneak, scout type character. So they're going to be running all over the place, causing a lot of trouble. And because they're so tiny and because they're so weak, they have built into their culture a way to reincarnate, which will definitely pull into the role-playing situation, I'm hoping. So one of those ways is built into their shared lives. So they have this way of storing their memories in an acorn that they can pass on. So when they know they're going to die, they store their memories and pass it on. And it's given to a youth of their race. And when they eat it, the memories pass on. So they kind of become somewhat reincarnated, and they become, I mean, obviously that the youth still has some memories of their own, right? But it kind of keeps the spirit alive. So I could definitely see situations where this is that character that sacrifices himself for the team, and then a few weeks later, the number 2 is back. So you could choose like one of his names. So in this case, they tend to have names that are a description, like far leap, which makes sense for, he can leap very far. So far leap. And then when he dies, you have far leap the second, far leap the third. So you could have these different characters. So I imagine that, say, within without being a joke, but I mean, it very well could end up being kind of a running joke where by the time you finish a campaign, you're on far leap the 37th or something like that. But it would still be fun. But I mean, there's trade-offs to playing that size of a character. It has definitely some bonuses, but there's some drawbacks too. But I didn't want to make it too much of a drawback, so that's why I designed the reincarnation. So it makes it kind of fun. Volans, any kind of bird folk, whether it's a parrot, an owl, an eagle, but so it's a winged bird folk. They have wings, which makes their playing style pretty different. And the items again. So they definitely have a lot of like movement-based attacks. You can see some of the icons over here. So they have some movement-based attacks because of their ability to fly. Also, you have a lot with their senses. So they have the ability to add different senses on true sight and dark vision and stuff. So that makes it pretty fun. One of the ways we also try to develop these as different entities is they have a limited diet. So some of them only eat meat, but then if say you were in the parrot family, maybe you would have to eat seeds and fruit more. So we want that to kind of play in. So I can definitely imagine role-playing situations where you're in a desert or something and certain creatures on your party are able to eat and others are not. So you have to take care of each other. Salamandrus, they are a amphibian type folk, definitely leaning towards salamanders, newts, axolotls, and frogs, any of that sort of thing. They also have built in some kind of fire and water affinities and steam. So, and they also have some abilities, definitely some regenerative abilities because they can grow certain things back. You can have tails or not have tails. You can add some extra gills, sort of like an axolotls that allow you to breathe underwater. So they end up being a very flexible race because you're able to play them on water or land with equal affinity, depending on which benefits you choose as you level up. The hominid. So to me, I can definitely see why a lot of people would go for the other races. So there has to be a reason why you'd want to play basically a human or a caveman or early tribal man. And for them, it's a lot of it's flexibility. And they end up in the setting, they're sort of like the glue. So the Ursus like their forest and they're king of the forest. The salamanders want to be in areas along the sea or in rivers and such where they can obviously be where they want to be. And that's where they're developed and designed and they're most fitting in that area. So the hominids are the most widespread, and they're also sort of a glue that allows trade to happen. So they also have some abilities that allow them to coordinate and work well together with other races. So they end up being a good all-around character, and they don't really necessarily have any super strong negatives to them, depending on where they're from. And they end up being decent crafters. So I think that could definitely work well as a tradesman, craftsman, and overall kind of like the glue of the team. Moderni, definitely I can see these ones getting played. There are going to be some advantages when you're doing stuff with artifacts and creating technology, and who doesn't want to play with like a laser sword or a flying vehicle. So they're going to use technology to offset a lot of the advantages that other races might have. So they don't have wings, so they build wings, right? They don't have claws, so they make weapons that are better than claws, that sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot of different options in there. They're not exactly as friendly as the hominids because you're like, well, why would you play hominids? You could just play these super high-tech guys. Well, there's reasons to it, and they tend to be a little more aloof and they kind of stick to themselves, and they're less likely to work together as a team. But I could definitely see them assembling a team to help them. So they would hire people to help them explore some of the ancient ruins to get stuff to build their technology. So there's definitely some role-playing opportunities there. A lot of stuff with metal and technology here to help them with their stats and abilities. The Lacerda are reptile or lizardmen, and some of them are poisonous, so they can be adapted to jungles or to deserts. There's different groups of them. So there's like subspecies, basically. Just like in elves and other races, you have the high elves, the wood elves, the dark elves, etc. So, and there are subspecies or groups for each of these races as well, depending on where their tribe's from. These ones also have some advantages. They're kind of almost like a competitor to the salamandrus in some ways, except these ones are probably the most desert oriented of any of the races. Hibiscus, sea folk, again, a very malleable people because depending on if they have, say, the genetic influences from, say, an octopus versus a whale or a shark. So some of those types of abilities are going to play into them. So there's not just like one specific look or style to them. So you could definitely pull in elements of, say, a jellyfish or any of those under aquatic species, and that allows them to be basically the most powerful in the ocean or the sea, the salted sea. They have there's some tribes of humans that are going to be on the water. There's definitely the Mustela, the otterkin that I haven't talked about much yet, but I will. They kind of have some overlap there, some with the salamanders, but these are kind of the undisputed king of the aquatic realm. So definitely having one of them on your team, or at least an ally, would be great if you're going to do anything around the water. They have a lot of ability to change their bodies as well, just like the clickers, depending on what they have. So you can get serrated fins, ink spray, some abilities to be semi-aquatic or larger size. And there's a lot of different options taken from nature that we were inspired by nature, even like chromatophores. So just like a cuttlefish or a squid where they can change the colors of their skin. So that kind of thing is something we really looked at. The arboremics, plant people, we definitely need to, we wanted to have these ones in there. They're an interesting part of the lore as well, because when the builders created this setting and they were losing a war. I don't want to give away too much of the campaign, but they were losing a war and they created 9 different species, and each of them was best suited for one area. They wanted to make sort of like these different niche races that would hopefully evolve and be able to survive what was coming. Well, 3 of the races then, because you saw I had 12 races, 3 of them therefore were not created by the builders. This is being one of them. They're plants that became sentient on their own. And then the 2 human races, which are actually from our world, our Earth, because this is a hollow Earth setting. So the hominists, the tribesmen, were able to fall through cracks in the earth, or they found a cave, or they did something that got them from the outer world to the hollow earth over periods of history. So some of them might have came from, Mayan or Aztec times or Egyptian times. So there's different races or different arrival times of these different human tribesmen. And then the Moderni are modern or even futuristic humanoids that after basically end of the world apocalyptic type thing, some of them survived and some of them have been burrowing and they found their way into the hollow earth, bringing their technology and their new genome with them. So they're not quite the same species or race. So that means the hominists, the Moderni, and the arboremics, they're the only ones that weren't specifically created for a purpose. So they kind of fill a different role in the setting. And these ones are also fairly like variable in definitely appearance, but also abilities. So all of our inspiration here was from plants. So we had spores or mycelial species, which I guess would be fungi too, right? Tendrils and growing and healing fruit and pure perfumed flowers and all these different things that were inspired by plants and other non-animal things that we saw in our world. So, and we tried to think, how could we take those and put those into a species and a race and make them interesting? Moving on to the Mastella, the Otterkin, the other of the smaller races, I guess, a little bit bigger than the Scurious, but still pretty small. They're great. They're like the kings of the Arctic area. So again, every species has that one area where they're kind of like the best. So in traveling, you'd probably either pull up an ally or even want somebody from one of those races to be in your party, right? So, and there's different ones there, just like otters, you can find them in rivers or the Arctic or whatnot. So there's different groups there, but they're kind of a fun hunter, sea creature, very cheerful, makes for a good bard rogue type character. And we have the Talpa. The Talpa are the digger burrower folk based on moles for the most part. Moles are any rodent that burrows. So you can even throw in a little bit of, say, like an echidna or rabbit or whatnot. And they have a lot of abilities that help them underground or being more durable or resilient. And it makes them fun to play. It's a different species. But again, they don't like being out in the open that much. But if you're going in subterranean areas or you need to dig, or maybe if you put on a set of goggles, you can be a great party member out and about. We also have a compatibility chart here, so it shows which ones can intermix. So the way this works is any races within the same pie slice can intermix, and you can have mixed breeds. So if you want to say, well, what if I wanted a character that his parents were half Ursus and the other ones were like half Scurious or Talpa or something, so you get sort of like a bear man mixed with like a digging mole, and you end up with a pretty cool race, right? That's possible because they're on the next pie slice. So even the Moderni and the humans, they have the ability to intermix with the Piscis or the Ursus, but they can't with, say, a Scurius, because like the squirrel folk are just too different. So you can always do with the next slice or two slices, with the exception of the plant people cannot with any of them, and the insect people cannot with any of them. And the ones on the end here, it's like the volans, they can only mix with reptiles because, reptiles, birds, they're similar. And the rodents, the rodentia, which would be Scurius, Mustela, and Talpa, they can only mix with Ursus, but they can't go the other way. So that I did want to add the ability to play mixed races, even though they would be pretty random, rare rather, and you would not play them often, and they'd generally probably be an outcast, or they would live only with the mother or the father or whatever. They would not, but on the edge of settlements that overlap, it's entirely possible. Moving on finally to classes. So we talked about the 12 races, now onto the 6 classes. So we have warriors, hunters, explorers, mystics, artisans, and stitchers. So among them, 2 of them are very obvious martial classes. The warriors it's a fighter, right? Hunters are more of a ranged weapon type fighter as well. And then explorers end up working sort of like a scout bard type thing. You can definitely pull in some influences of, say, like the thieves and rogues there for sure. Mystics are our only true casting class, and they have all types of magic. Artisans are they're artificers, they're engineers, they're builders and craftsmen. Stitchers work as a sort of a magical class or half magical class, whereby they take like a buddy, an animal creature, and then they graft other pieces onto them. So you end up with, in the picture here, you can see the guy's got sort of like a mountain lionish type creature hanging out with him. But then imagine he grafts on crab claws too. So now that's a mountain lion with crab claws, or a saber-tooth tiger rather with crab claws, or put on like a scorpion's tail on the back and use that. So they end up having a buddy, a companion that helps with them, and they also have the ability to upgrade them. So, and they end up being good medics as well. So that makes for a good party member because they have healing abilities. So you have a cleric healer that makes these chimera buddies, makes for an interesting play. Warriors, again, a pretty good fighter, and they have a lot of different abilities. So whereas the races only had 15, here you have almost 24, 21 actually, but there's also room for 3 custom abilities for the DMs or the players to come up with on their own. Hunters, so these are a little bit shorter and quicker than the races. There's not as much detail needed. They also have a little narrative story with them. And 21 different abilities, a lot of them dealing for hunters with accuracy, range, and ranged attacks or multi-attacks. Makes them pretty deadly. Explorers, these are a really well-rounded character type where you can get a lot of different stuff. It helps with movement, healing, special attacks. There's just kind of a jack of all trades type character. It's a very good way to fill out as either a solo character or to round out and fill out a group. Mystics are again our only true caster class. They have elemental affinities. You choose an elemental affinity like fire, air, ice, water, stone as a group. So you get a group of these spells. A lot of these spells work as a mixture of cantrips and spells that fit within that scheme or that element. And you're going to use those until basically exclusively. And there's a number of uses and recharges. So when you first get one, you get 1 effect out of that whole set. And then there's a recharge of 10 after you use it, but you can upgrade that later. This is a little bit more complicated than the other races. So, other classes, I'm sorry. So you can upgrade that by becoming an apprentice, journeyman, and eventually master, where you get faster recharges, more effects, and some bonus abilities, or even the ability to have 2 concurrent effects. So that's a pretty fun character class. Definitely see using one of these in most parties. They have a lot of abilities, but the fact that you can tag this on to any race, so you could have a very martial, very strong, say, Ursus warrior that's also a mystic. There's no limitations there. So a lot of times in other games, you have very limiting abilities in terms of combat. When you're a if you're a warrior, you can't be a good mage, right? But with this system, it is very easy to add this to any of them. I mean, if you wanted to be one of those scurrious rogue type running around squirrel people, and then add on the ability to be a mystic and be a caster, that's fine. You'd be quick, you'd be hard to kill, you'd be sneaky, and you'd be able to be like a spell sniper. But then you throw this on, say, clickers, which are very martial, very have extra bonus attacks. So you're hacking people up with weapons and like your extra arms and claws. You've got maybe wings, and then you've still got some magic abilities on top of it. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility here. Artisans, again, somewhat meant for the human races, but doesn't have to be. Again, you could be a squirrel folk or an otterkin that really likes to tinker and play around with stuff. I mean, those creatures are curious, right? So you're going to go through and use all these different abilities where you get to put together a lot of these different artifacts and things that you're making. So you're allowed to make things and upgrade weapons. So it's a lot about upgrading and crafting. And they also have a lot of crafting suggestions here. So anyone can craft in the whole game, definitely. But they get a lot of bonuses by being an artisan, an inventor, or a mastermind as they upgrade. So they're able to put these things together with better bonuses. So I could definitely see having one of these guys on your party too, because you're going around, you're surviving, you're collecting all these materials, and then you gather all your stuff and put it in a pile, and you give your artisan a chance to upgrade your equipment. So that would be definitely great. Moving on to the Stitchers, our last one here. Again, they're the best healers. They're able to piece together different animals. So they're going to put together, you can upgrade from novice, adept, master to chimera overlord. And that's a kind of interesting thing, because most of the classes and abilities they don't have prerequisites. They don't have a previous one. These ones you have to build on top of each other. So you're leveling up. You probably wouldn't add those until some of the higher levels, but it definitely gives you advantages for staying the course, because once you get higher up there, there's rules here that tell you how many mods you can pack into a creature. So a lower level guy might only be able to get, say, one add-on to the creature. So you've got your, I don't know, let's say like a spiky fish, right? And you want to add something to it, like octopus legs. Well, once you do that, you're done. You can't fit anything else. But the higher level chimera stitchers can actually add more and more modifications on there. So you add the octopus legs, but then you want more durable, so you add crab shells on the outside, that kind of thing, if it was an aquatic creature. Or again, with the saber-toothed tiger, you already added the crab claws, and then you want to add wings. Okay, so now it's flying, and it can grab you or bite you. It ends up being a very dangerous creature to have as your buddy, right? So they're a very flexible, really great creature. I mean, a creature doctor. They're like a halfway between a cleric and a veterinarian and Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, right? So we're able to put together a lot of that stuff. And then we always have a lot of gear and stuff you can add later, but which again can be updated by your artisans and crafters. Well, I hope you liked this look at some of the races and classes in Terra Incognita. 12 races, 6 classes, and a lot of flexibility because you can mix and match. And within each one, there are a lot of different options, and nobody has to choose the same one. And my character with the same race and same class as yours, even at the same level, could be very different than yours. So because of just the flexibility and that build your own modular design, this is what we intended. So I hope you like to look at this. We want to launch our Kickstarter soon, looking for that 200th follower so we can launch. Help us out, guys. let's talk more about this later. I'll come back and I'll share some more of Terra Incognita. Thank you.